YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to Bananas Epic Gaming, and today on Bananas Epic Gaming, we are going to be doing another episode of CageTalk, and I'm going to be ranking my personal, keyword, personal, top 30 horror movies that I've seen of all time. This is my personal list of the horror movies that I love to watch, especially during the Halloween season. So please keep that in mind, and I also try to limit one or two per franchise. Some horror movies may have more than two, but that's because I love that movie. So let's get into it. Coming in last place is The Strangers. Yes, The Strangers is number 30. I'll tell you why right now. Without going into too much detail, in case you haven't seen this horror movie is not everybody's favorite, but the fact that this could happen to basically anyone, it could happen to you, your parents, your brother, your sister, your wife, your kid, it could happen to anybody, is what I'm trying to say. It's about a couple who come home and they get basically home invaded. Doesn't have the highest body count by far, but it's the creepy factor that it could happen to you. Go watch this movie. I finally watched it. I watched it during the pandemic, and one of the creepiest movies that I've seen in a while. I didn't really get spoiled on it. I got spoiled on the sequel, but this one I managed to stay away from the spoilers on it, other than the reason why that is happening to the people that is happening in the movie, because they were home. It's worth a watch. Now on to number 29. Coming in 29th place is going to be the original Final Destination. Now the Final Destination franchise, to me, I love all the movies. I love all the movies in this franchise. The first two especially. I can't wait for the next one that they're currently trying to make. The second one, I hate going behind a log truck whenever I see that. PTSD if I'm in the car and we're driving behind it for long periods of time. And the first one made my fear of airplanes that much more intensified. Now, the first one, Alex has a vision. He gets himself and some friends off the plane when his classmates are taking a trip to France, and the plane explodes, and then they start dying one by one in the order that they would have on the plane. To me, that was such an easy and good concept that I knew it was going to be a hit. When I heard that when I was a little kid, I knew it was going to be a hit. And it is. Final Destination is one of the good horror movies to come out in the early 2000s. And they spawned multiple sequels. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Go have a Final Destination marathon. Now on to 28th place. This one's going to cause some controversy, but coming in 28th place is going to be A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. Now, I would agree that this movie is fair, but Part 4 to me didn't do that good of a job as Part 1 and 3 did, and maybe Part 2 you can make a case for that, because Part 4 makes you start on an acid trip. Whether it is scary or dark, just as the first 3 films, or it doesn't reach its high potential that it had. But anyways, I'll have to say that the special effects in this one are well done, and so are the characters. There's one kill that I find very interesting, which is when a lady turns into a cockroach and gets killed by Freddy, which is like the most liked and kill in the entire series. To me, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 is one of the movies that's in the middle, but it's not the best and it's not the worst. It's dead on in the middle, in my opinion. And coming in 27th place is going to be Friday the 13th, Part 3. Now, Friday the 13th, Part 3, I don't consider this to be one of the best Friday the 13th movies or one of the worst. To me, it's in the middle. This movie can be broken down into 3 parts as it gets better as it goes on. First is slow and boring. Then you introduce some uninteresting characters and setting up the basic plot from the previous movie. This Shelly character is practically an over-the-top, pathetic nerd person. You have the hippie characters who are just the run-of-the-mill and are trophy as they come. The second part is when the bulk of the killings start to happen, starting from the gang members who show up to steal gas from the campers. The movie starts to get interesting as we get some pretty cool kills, and Shelly gives Jason his iconic hockey mask, and that's where Jason gets it from, because he kills Shelly and he gets the mask. The final half hour of the film is absolutely fantastic, with everything that a horror climax should be. We see the first glimpse of Jason as being superhuman, crushing a man's skull with his bare hands, surviving things that are without a doubt not survivable, and he brutalizes his victims in a way that would make it seem the most twisted minds would blush. It gives us one of the best survivor girls in horror history. She fights and she hides well. She's resourceful, smart, and she's earned the title Survivor Girl in every way possible. And aside from one bad choice of running upstairs, she makes good decisions throughout this entire movie. She's a 10 out of 10. Overall, this movie, in my mind, is a good sequel to Jason's killing spree, and it only leads into the best Friday the 13th film in my mind, and that being Part 4. Coming in 26th place is Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2. Halloween 2 being set the same night as the original movie, taking place in the same town, same setting, except for this time we're in a hospital, following Laurie Strode, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis again, the aftermath of everything that happened to her. I thought was a good step in the right direction. To me, this is maybe the second or third best movie in the original timeline. Original timeline is 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. We get some good kills in this movie. We get some good character development, and we learn that Michael and Laurie are brother and sister. Overall, Halloween 2 is a good slasher flick, and it's a good flick to watch during the Halloween holidays. Now on to the next movie. Okay, so coming up next is going to be another Halloween movie. It can be both versions, and that is going to be Halloween 6 / Halloween 6, the producer's cut. So to me, Halloween 6, I like Halloween 6. Not that many people like this one. Some say that this is one of the worst ones in the series, but it's not one of the worst ones. It's not maybe top 5, maybe it's number 6, but it's up there. I like the Thorn trilogy for what it was. I adore Danielle Harris. The fact that she wasn't in this movie was one of the biggest letdowns to me. And the producer's cut and the theatrical cut, you can pick and choose. If you want one that has a more backstory to the Thorn and the cult of Thorn and all that, go with the producer's cut. If you want like more gruesome death scenes and more death scenes in general, go with the theatrical cut. If you want more music that is like not the generic type are more well known, go with the theatrical cut. Like Fool's Cave On is in the theatrical cut, and it's not in the producer's cut. The producer's cut feels like a better movie overall, but the producer's cut and the theatrical cut, there's a certain death scene that is dragged out. The person that dies in the barn. She dies in the barn in the theatrical cut, and she dies in the hospital in the producer's cut. Overall, Halloween 6, it is one of my favorite, not one of my favorite Halloween movies. I would say it's maybe number 5, 6. It fell. After I rewatched them all recently because of Halloween Ends coming out. And you're going to find out where it falls when Halloween Ends is out, and I put out my ranking video of the entire series. Now on to the next movie. Coming up next is going to be a new movie that came out in the last few years, and it is called Host. So the movie Host takes place on July 30th, 2020. While the United States is under lockdown because of the pandemic, a group of friends, Haley, Gemma, Emma, Caroline, Raiden, and Teddy, have decided to host weekly Zoom calls to stay in contact because of the pandemic that's going on, and it was like people were afraid to go out really and see their friends because they were afraid of the going around. So they decide one day to host a seance, and this is where the movie basically picks up, because they're getting ready for a seance. And so on and so forth. One of the friends makes up a ghost, and that's when everything goes to crap. I really like this movie. I had kind of low expectations going into it when I heard about it and I bought it on Apple TV. But I really enjoyed it. This movie was a pleasant surprise. If you like the supernatural type of movie with basically a handheld, in this case is on a computer screen, then this is your type of movie. I would say maybe like Unfriended is the vibes that this gives. And they have some creative death scenes for them shooting it themselves. And I think the cast did a phenomenal job. Now on to the next movie. The next movie is going to be another more recent movie. It is Countdown. So when I heard that Jeannie was in this movie, Jeannie is from, most of you may know her from the React channel. When I heard that she was in this movie, because I knew she was doing acting, I rushed to go see it because I adore Jeannie. She's one of my favorite people. So, Countdown, decent horror flick. It's about an app that tells you when you're gonna die. When you download it and put in all your info, people are playing it at a party that Jeannie is at in the opening. One person there gets told she has a few hours left, and you know what happens from there. Countdown overall, good supernatural horror movie. Not one of the best on the pedestal, but it's a good supernatural horror flick. It came out in the 2010s, late 2010s. It came out in 2019. And I personally enjoyed it. And I see maybe they left it open for a sequel, but I don't think they're going to make one. Now on to the next movie. Okay, so coming up next would be Willy's Wonderland. So Willy's Wonderland is basically Five Nights at Freddy's. in horror movie form on the big screen, because that is a horror game. When I heard that Emily Torstai was in this movie, and I saw that she got casted, I put it on my calendar and I waited. And the moment this movie came out, I went and saw it. And the moment it became available to buy, I bought it. Yes, for Emily Torstai, because she's another person that I adore in Hollywood. Nicolas Cage is also in this movie. He has no lines, which was really odd seeing him on the screen and not talking. But I basically got Five Nights at Freddy's vibes from this. If you like the Five Nights at Freddy's games, go see this movie if you haven't. It's a decent popcorn flick. And I think that Emily Torstai stole the show, in my opinion. Now on to the next movie. Okay, so coming up next is going to be Friday the 13th, Part 4, The Final Chapter. So Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. This is one of the most beloved Friday the 13th movies, and in my opinion is the best Friday the 13th movie. This is the one that introduces Tommy Jarvis. It takes place the night after the Higgins Haven event, aka Part 3. You got Chris Glover in this movie. You have Corey Feldman. This overall was a really, really good Friday the 13th movie, and it was like one of the first ones I saw when I was a little kid. And from that moment on, Jason was like my top 4 of favorite horror movie villains. My number 1, of course, was Michael, Scream, Jason, and obviously Freddy. But back to Jason. If you haven't seen this movie, I don't know what to tell you. This is one of the best horror movies, in my opinion, from that era of movies. And it did tremendously well in the box office. And this is the movie that they killed Jason. And then he's on in the next one, and he comes back as the undead Jason that we know from Jason Lives to Jason Goes to Hell. In my mind, see this movie if you can. It's a good popcorn flick. It's a good movie to watch during the Halloween season, or if you're having a marathon. This is like one of the best ones. Now on to the next movie. Okay, coming up next is going to be a really popular movie, and it is known for its jump scares. It is based on a true story. It is The Conjuring. Now, The Conjuring 3, when it came out, it was labeled as the scariest movie ever made. People were intrigued because it was based off the cases of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I was intrigued too because I love a good horror movie that's based on a true story, or a good movie that's based on a true story. This movie spawned 2 sequels, Conjuring 2 and Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. It also spawned a few spin-offs, The Nun, Annabelle Creation, and Annabelle Comes Home. Annabelle Comes Home, I follow, and we follow each other. The actress, Katie, she did a tremendous job in that movie, and I saw it twice in the theater just for her. Support people that you know or you talk to. If you're an actor or if you're a fan of them, always support your fellow actors. But The Conjuring, I really like this movie. It creeped me out a little, and it is, I believe, one of the best movies that came out that year. At the top of my head, I can't remember that many movies that came out that year, but it is one of my favorite movies that came out that year. If you are watching it with your significant other or your friends or by yourself or your family, you want a creepy movie, this is the one that you should watch. Now on to the next movie. Alright, coming up next, this one might be a little controversial, but it is A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. So the original Nightmare on Elm Street. The original Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the movies that started it all. This isn't like the movie that made Wes Craven a bigger household name in my mind. This entire series made Robert Englund. Because when you see Freddy Krueger, you only picture Robert Englund. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, yes, it has some stinkers, but the original is one of the best ones. Hands down, bar none. Heather Langenkamp did amazing in that movie. Johnny Depp, still to this day, has one of the most iconic deaths from this movie that came out in 1984. Keeping that in mind, and in 2022, he has one of the most iconic horror movie deaths. If you haven't seen it, I don't know why you're watching this, but thank you for watching the video. But go see this movie if you have not seen it. It is an all-time classic. Now on to the next movie. Okay, coming up next is going to be a Netflix original series movie from a famous book series, Fear Street Part 2. Now, the Fear Street movies, when they came out last year, I was intrigued. The first one is like an homage / love story to Scream in my mind. This one, which is the best one out of the three, in my personal opinion, is like a love story to Friday the 13th, and the third one is like a love story to the Blair Witch Project, in my mind. Sadie Sink did an amazing job in this movie, and the fact that every actor got to work on the movies, all three of them, because somehow they were all involved in every movie, like their ancestors, like the people from part 1 and 2, they play their ancestors in part 3, because part 3 takes place in 1666, and part 2 takes place in 1978, and part 1 takes place in 1994. So like right around the time Scream was coming out. This is why I said it's like a love story to Scream. Sadie Sink was a highlight for this movie for me, and Emily Rudd, she was a highlight for this movie for me. Fear Street, if you haven't seen it, and you have Netflix, watch all three of them, because it's a tremendous ride. And you want to know why everything is happening. And you can kind of tell if you read the books, you know why. But the movie keeps you on the edge of your seat, and I love that. Now on to the next movie. Alright, coming up next is another Netflix original movie, The Babysitter, Killer Queen. So, The Babysitter Killer Queen came out in 2020. It is the sequel to The Babysitter, which came out in 2017. And I was sold on this once I heard that Jenna Ortega was in it. Because if you've been listening to CageTalk, and you listened to the CageTalk where I did the Scream re-ranking and I did the Scream 5 review, you know that I adore Jenna Ortega. She's a tremendous young actress, and I believe she's going to be a big household name, even more than she already is in a few years. She's had a tremendous 2022. She was in Scream, she was in X, and she was also going to be in Wednesday, aka the Addams Family TV show, and she's in the Jurassic Park / World Camp Cretaceous TV show, cartoon. Babysitter Killer Queen, let's get back to that. It has Robbie Amell, who was Firestorm in The Flash / Arrowverse, Samara Weaving. Pretty good cast overall. I love this movie. It is a good, funny time. If you have not seen it and you have Netflix, put this on your list of movies to watch. Now on to the next movie. Okay, coming up next is Paranormal Activity 4, the fourth installment to the Paranormal Activity franchise. Paranormal Activity 4 is the only Paranormal Activity movie that is on my list. I like this one because it took a step away from the sisters a little bit, and the main person was Catherine Newton, who is playing Cassie Lang in the new Marvel movies that's coming out. She will make her debut as Cassie Lang, the adult version of Cassie Lang in Ant-Man 3. She plays Alex, who's a neighbor who's watching Katie, the sister from 1 and 2. She was in part 2 for a little bit. Katie's son, and they try to get Alex's foster brother, and paranormal stuff happens. This is one of the better Paranormal Activity movies in my mind. This one and the Marked ones are the two best ones in my opinion. Number 2 is up there too. Those are the top 3. But this one, I like this one a lot more because Catherine Newton made this movie what it is. Now on to the next movie. Coming up next is going to be a movie back from the 90s, and it is I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, this movie and the first one, because this is the sequel, I think were a 2-1-2 combo. The third one, I'm not going to talk about that one. But I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Jennifer Love Hewitt returns. She did an amazing job in this movie, and this is when she was like really popular. Freddie Prinze Jr. is in this movie, and Mekhi Phifer is in this movie, and Brandy's in this movie as well. They are Jennifer Love Hewitt, Mekhi Phifer, and Brandy. They win a trip to the Bahamas on 4th of July weekend, and what do you know? It's a setup. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is not everybody's favorite because of some characters and some people say really bad screenwriting and dialogue, but I like this movie for what it is. Jennifer Love Hewitt alone is worth watching this movie for. She was a big name like in the late 90s and early 2000s. And you're in for a decent popcorn flick. I know I've said that before about a lot of these movies, but you are in for a decent popcorn flick and a decent laugh if you watch this movie. Now on to the next movie. Up next is a popular movie, Ready or Not. Now, Ready or Not came out in 2019, and I didn't really watch it until 2020 when we were in lockdown. And let me tell you, I missed out. I was missing out. This movie is hilarious and funny. Some of the deaths in this movie could have easily been avoidable. That's what's so hilarious about it. A bride on her wedding night takes a sinister turn when her newly in-laws have her play a deadly game. Ready or Not, here basically hide and seek. Samara Weaving was literally the heart and soul of this movie in my mind. I saw Samara Weaving in The Babysitter, then I saw her in this, and I became a fan of Samara Weaving. She's a really talented actress, and I hope to see her in more movies. And now on to the next one. The next movie I want to talk about, I'm just going to say this, I'm not going to acknowledge the director, I'm only going to acknowledge the actors, and I'm going to try to acknowledge the plot but I'm not going to mention the director's name. And that movie is going to be Jeepers Creepers. Now, Jeepers Creepers came out in 2001, and 21 years later, we still have questions. Like, what is he? We know that he's a demon-like figure, and he eats people. He comes around every 23rd spring for 23 days. That's literally everything we know. Because the first 3 movies takes place like 3 or 4 days in between each other. Jeepers Creepers 3 was original, is timeline-wise is the second one, and the second one is the third one, and the fourth one that's coming out is supposed to take place, I think, right after the second one, 23 years later. So, who knows? Gina Phillips and Justin Long, they were the stars of this movie, and this movie creeped me out a little as a kid because of the truck and the look of the creeper. And Jonathan Beck, he did a good job playing the creeper. That's all I'm going to say about this movie. Yes, I'm going to go see the new one because it's a new director, it's a new studio, it's a new team working on it. The guy who had his name on the first 3 no longer has anything to do with it, so I'm going to see the next one, and I will maybe eventually talk about the next one on a CageTalk. If they announce part 5, I'll probably talk about part 4. Now on to the next movie. Coming up next is going to be a personal favorite of mine, Stay Alive. Stay Alive is a horror movie that's based off a video game, where in the video game, if you die in the game, you die for real. And I thought when this movie came out in 2006 that it was one of the nice movies that I've seen in that year. Sophia Bush, I thought she did a good job in this movie. When she died in this movie, she, in my mind, has one of the saddest deaths in the movie. Frankie Muniz, he is in this movie. This is when Frankie Muniz was, I believe this was like right after Malcolm in the Middle. And the movie's about Elizabeth Bathory. If you haven't seen this movie, it's worth the watch. This movie is worth the watch. If you haven't seen it, it's worth it. If you're a fan of horror movie video games, this is worth it. Give it a watch, and I promise you may like it. This is one of my personal favorites. It just barely misses my top 10. Now on to the next movie. Okay, so coming in 12th place is going to be Scream 2, aka Scream the sequel. Now, Scream 2 is obviously the sequel to Scream. We're going to talk about Scream a little later on, and this came out in 1997, December 12th. This was a movie that took a lot of risk. They tried to up the ante. Body count, bigger, death scenes, much more elaborate, much more gore, carnage, candy. Yes, and quoted Randy from Scream. And he cut us off before we found out what the third thing was. And when I say they took a huge risk, because they killed off one of the surviving survivors from the original Scream, Randy. And if that would have happened in today's day and age, the internet would have eaten this movie alive, I think. Because Randy is, and was, one of the most beloved characters, maybe in horror overall. Jamie Kennedy played that role to a T. He was made and born to be Randy. And the killer, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, Mrs. Loomis, and The other guy was kind of obvious, Mickey, because he disappeared after the cafeteria scene. Scream 2 follows Sydney into college with Randy, and killings happen. Dewey comes to keep an eye on her, and Gail comes because killings are happening again. I personally like Scream 2. Yes, it's not my favorite of the franchise, but it's also not my least favorite. My least favorite is Scream 4 because of the toxic fan community. But I love them. I love the Scream movies overall. Ghostface is my number 1 horror movie killer out of my top 5. Now on to the next movie. We have reached my top 10. And this one could have been flip-flopped with a few of these movies. And coming in number 10, the original Halloween. Now, the original Halloween is basically the movie that started it all, that made the slasher genre what it is today. It came out in 1978, and it still holds up to this day as one of the best horror movies of all time. The score, the camera angles, the acting, amazing. John Carpenter made this movie really, really cheap, and he turned it into a franchise that everybody loves. Everybody has seen at least one Halloween movie, and I have a few of them in my top horror movies of all time. Halloween 1, it's not higher than the other two that are on this list, but it is, in my opinion, one of the best horror movies that's ever made. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and see this movie. This movie is the reason why we have movies like Scream, Freddy, Jason, and all the other horror movies that came after Halloween. And now on to the next movie. Coming up next is a movie that some may not consider horror, but some do, and I'm one of the people that do. Coming in 9th place is gonna be Jurassic Park. Now, Jurassic Park, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. The animatronics, the story, and it's dinosaurs eating people. I love Jurassic Park. This was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I had nightmares of the T-Rex chasing me through the park when I was like 5, when I first watched it. And from that moment on, I became a fan. I've seen every movie over 20, 30 times. I play all the Jurassic Park games on the computer, play Season 4, etc. I have merch from Jurassic Park. I've been on the rides at Universal Studios, and I've also made the POV of the ride from Universal Studios. Jurassic Park is one of the best movies of all time, and you can make an argument that it is horror because it's dinosaur eating people. If you haven't seen Jurassic Park, do yourself a favor. Take a day or two, watch Jurassic Park, The Lost World, which we will talk about later on because it is also on this list, Jurassic Park 3, and then the 3 new ones. And now on to the next movie. Coming in 8th place would be A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Now, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors is one of the best. Now, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors is one of the best horror movie sequels of all time, in my opinion. Heather Langenkamp was tremendous in this movie. She comes back after taking the movie off. The main kids in this movie are the last of the Elm Street kids, and Freddy's coming back to kill them all. I really enjoyed this movie growing up. The TV death is one of the most iconic deaths in a horror movie, and Robert Englund killed it as Freddy again. And if they would have ended the series here, that would have been a good ending, but they didn't, and they made a couple more good movies and they made a few bad movies. But this movie is one of the best horror movie sequels of all time. You should see it if you haven't. Now on to the next movie. Coming up next is going to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003 with Jessica Biel. Now, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 is the movie that basically kickstarted the remake train. This was the first good remake of a horror movie that I personally seen in the theater. The cast was phenomenal. The guy that they had to play Leatherface was great. And it was a nice, amazing, fresh feel on a cult classic. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 spawned another sequel, The Beginning, with Jordana Brewster. That's an honorable mention right there, but I like this one more. Basic Texas Chainsaw Massacre kills with chainsaws, people getting cut in half. Good horror flick, good flick to watch during the spooky season. If you haven't seen it, I would put this on your list. Now on to the next movie. Coming up next, just missing the top 5, in 6th place, is gonna be Sinister. The movie Sinister is one of the creepiest, weird, scariest movies I've seen in theaters. I have never seen a theater be that frightened and jump as I did when I saw Sinister in the movie theater. If you have not seen Sinister, I would put this on your list to see. I've said that about most of these movies, but this should be one of the movies that you see. This needs to be one of the horror movies that you see before you die. Sinister, creepy plot, creepy killer. The death scenes in this movie are unique, and they tie into the story. That's all I'm going to say on this movie because I don't want to give a lot away, but this movie is a must-see. Go see it. Now on to the next movie. Coming in 4th place is going to be Jurassic Park 2, aka The Lost World. I know I'm going to get people in my comments saying that Jurassic Park is not horror, but it has horror elements. The entire series has horror elements. It is dinosaurs eating people. Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World, is one of the better sequels, and it has double the everything that the first one had. First one had 1 T-Rex, this one has 2 and a baby, so it has 3. Raptors, a raptor pack, dinosaurs on the mainland, and more death scenes. The T-Rex is pushing the trailer off the cliff is one of the best sequences in the Jurassic Park universe to this day, still. And if you haven't seen the first one, you probably haven't seen this one, so you should put this on your bucket list. Watch the entire series. Now on to the next movie. And coming in 4th place is Scream 5, the Scream movie that just came out this year. Now, Scream 5, it is so high on my list because it's new and I haven't gotten tired of it yet, and I haven't found reasons to hate it. But this is the second best Scream film in my mind. And the fact that they tied it all together, I'm not going to tell you how they tied it together with the original trilogy. Go find that out for your own, because it is kind of a shocker, but not really. Melissa Barrera did a tremendous job as the lead. And Jenna Ortega is going to be a force to be reckoned with in a few years. She's had such a tremendous year. Like we said earlier, she was in X, she was in this, she's in Wednesday, the Addams Family TV show that's coming out, and she was in the Camp Cretaceous series finale and series. She is gonna be a huge star. Ghostface is back. He's brutal than ever, and he gives 0 Fs. The original trio, Gail, Dewey, and Sydney. We went into this knowing that they're going to try and write them off, but I had faith that they were going to do right by the trio and do right by Wes Craven. Wes Craven would be proud. And this movie, man, when they did that one thing in the hospital, not a dry eye in the theater. If you haven't seen this installation of Scream and you're 50-50 about it, I'm going to tell you again, because we covered it on the rankings and we covered it on the review. Watch it. It is worth it. Second best Scream movie in my mind, and second best sequel. Now on to the next movie. Coming in third place is going to be Halloween H2O 20 years later. Now, Halloween H2O is the movie that started another timeline. This movie discontinues everything that happened in the Thorn trilogy. It's Jamie Lee Curtis's first movie back in a long time, because she was in part 1 and 2, and then they killed her off screen, and they brought her back in part 7, Halloween H2O. And this was also like one of the first ones I was alive for and able to see in the movie theater, but I didn't, because I was still really young. This also was in the era of Scream. Kevin Williamson, the guy who wrote Scream, wrote, and I believe he also directed this movie. And this is, to most people, one of the best Halloween movies. And it is. Halloween H2O is... Oh, no. Kevin Williamson only helped write the movie. Story. Halloween H2O is one of the best Halloween movies and Halloween sequels. Hands down. The feel, the suspense, low body count, but if you can have a scary movie, you don't have to have a high body count. Now on to number 2. And coming in second place is going to be Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Now, Scream 4 is my personal favorite Halloween movie, and one of my personal favorite horror movies in general. Michael Myers is back, and he goes after his niece. Danielle Harris did a tremendous job in this movie. She was extremely young when she started on this movie, and she is still an amazing person to this day. The kills in this movie, the Brady one, yikes. And the chase scene on the roof is all I gotta say. Donald Pleasance, may he rest in peace. This was another positive step for Halloween because of him. He made the Thorn trilogy as well. It's Danielle Harris. But Halloween 4 is one of the best horror movie sequels in my mind. I love Halloween 4. I watch it a lot. That's one of my favorite Halloween and horror movies to watch. And that's why it's number 2, obviously. Now on to number 1. And if you haven't guessed it by now, but coming in first place is going to be the original Scream. Now, Scream is one of the best horror movies of all time, and it is in my opinion, best horror movie that came out in the 1990s. Wes Craven hit a gold mine when he directed Scream, and Kevin Williamson hit a gold mine when he wrote Scream. David Arquette, Neve Campbell, and Courtney Cox, the trio, made this movie. Jamie Kennedy was also a big part of this movie until they offed him in Scream 2. But Scream overall is a reason why we have a lot of the horror movies we have today. It helped rejuvenate, put life into the horror movie franchise. And Scream is a lot of people's favorite horror movie. And Ghostface, the iconic Ghostface mask and the iconic voice of Roger L. Jackson as Ghostface. That is a good way for your franchise to be. Overall, if you haven't seen Scream, watch it. This is, without a doubt, one of the best horror movies ever made. You can make a case that it is top 2, but it is definitely in people's top 5, in my personal opinion. Scream is that good. I want to say thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Tap the little bell on my YouTube app so you never miss an upload. And you guys have a happy and safe Halloween.